the same time, I told Mr. Meadows yesterday, and I repeated a couple of times today, that this briefing was not, and I emphasize, was not a substitute for the Speaker and Minority Leader of the Senate's request for a full briefing of our members. And any time when you have a threat to American personnel, whether they be military or civilian, it is a serious matter and needs to be taken with the utmost importance and utmost concern. I think it's fair to say, as my Republican colleague said yesterday, all of us are concerned that there would be payments from Russia, who is not a friendly entity, who is not an ally, who has undermined our elections, and who has done everything they can in Afghanistan and other places in the world to undermine U.S. interests. It is therefore very, very troubling when you have information that is given that indicates that there are payments being made to specifically target U.S. personnel, particularly armed services personnel. So I was looking forward to a briefing. I would have preferred the briefing, and I said this to Mr. Meadows, that the briefing had been given by Intel personnel, either from CIA and Director Haspel in particular, or NSA, so that we would have the direct evidence and discussion from the intelligence community as to how credible they assess the information. But I also agree with John Bolton, who said it was inconceivable from his perspective that there is not a cause for briefing on this matter of such importance. Apparently that did not happen. The president called this a hoax publicly. Nothing in the briefing that we have just received led me to believe it is a hoax. There may be different judgments as to the level of credibility, but there was no assertion that the information we had was a hoax. I took to this briefing Mr. Engel, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Schiff, the chairman of the Intel Committee, Mr. Smith, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Meeks and Mr. Sherman, who are the ranking members behind Mr. Engel on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and then Ms. Spanberger, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Keating, and Ms. Sherrill. All of them have experience or particular responsibilities in the intel and national security sphere. I thought this briefing was the White House personnel telling us their perspective. I think we knew the White House perspective. What we need to know is the intelligence perspective. So I am therefore urging the White House and the Chief of Staff to follow up on my request to make sure that we are briefed by the intelligence community directly so that we can get to the bottom of this. I'm sure that Mr. Schiff will be following up on this through the Intel Committee, as I have urged him to do. So without further discussion, let me now yield to Mr. Schiff.
Thank you, Steny. Just want to underscore a couple of points. First, I appreciate the White House inviting us to come and be briefed. As Steny said, there's not a substitute for briefing all the members of the House. But the right people to give the briefing really were not in the room. We need to hear from the heads of the intelligence agencies about how they assess the allegations that have been made publicly. What can they tell us about the truth or falsity of these allegations? What can they tell us about steps they are undertaking or have undertaken to vet any information that they may have? In my view, the right people were not in the room to give us the kind of briefing that we needed to get. The second point I would make is, as we look at these, and I'm going to call them allegations because I can't confirm or deny any underlying intelligence. As we look at these allegations, number one, the President of the United States should not be inviting Russia into the G7 or G8. we should be considering what sanctions are appropriate to further deter Russia's malign activities, not further ingratiating Russia into the community of civilized nations. And I find it inexplicable in light of these very public allegations that the president hasn't come before the country and assured the American people that he will get to the bottom of whether Russians are putting a bounty on the heads of American troops, and that he will do everything in his power to make sure that we protect American troops. I do not understand for a moment why the president isn't saying this to the American people right now and is relying on, I don't know, I haven't heard, I haven't been briefed. That's just not excusable. His responsibility as Commander-in-Chief is to protect our troops. And I shared the concern at the White House today that I think many of us have, which is there may be a reluctance to brief the president on things he doesn't want to hear. And that may be more true with respect to Putin and Putin's Russia than with respect to any other subject matter. Many of us do not understand his affinity for that autocratic ruler who means our nation ill. And so if there's a problem with being willing to brief the president on intelligence he doesn't want to hear, that's a problem for our entire nation's security. So in the Intel Committee, we have asked for an in-person briefing by the intel agencies. We've asked for any underlying documentary intelligence they may or may not have. And we hope that that will be done soon, as well as the full House briefing. And I thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schiff. Mr. Adam Smith was with us as well, who is the chair of the House Armed Services Committee. As you know, they are marking up their bills, so he is not here. But now let me recognize the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Engel.
Thank you, Steny. I think the words of Mr. Schiff is something that all of us left the White House thinking about and scratching our heads. It makes no sense whatsoever for the president and the administration not to call out Putin. I don't understand what it is with the president's infatuation with Putin. If you just look at the facts and you say, okay, what happened? I mean, it comes into question the fact that it was a bounty put on American troops. If that isn't something to go crazy about, then I don't know what is. But instead of the president apparently telling Putin how upset we are and how we're not going to stand for this.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ayman Mohyeldin here in New York. As we come on the air this hour, we are following live breaking developments on multiple fronts. A lot of important stories playing out right now. First of all, the Supreme Court set to hand down more decisions any moment now. We are keeping an eye out for that, including, of course, a very important ruling, perhaps, on the president's taxes and financial records. We are also live on Capitol Hill, where Dr. Anthony Fauci and other top health officials are testifying before a Senate committee on the coronavirus pandemic, what they have to say about more than half of all states now seeing a rise in infections. Also,